This pandemic has changed the way we work and live, testing each of us both personally and professionally in a way we never imagined. But not surprisingly, in the face of adversity, we responded with agility, innovation, and a restless determination to serve. This pandemic has changed healthcare as we know it, and our team continues to rise to the challenge. We started by making sure our team members were cared for so they can continue to serve others. With a strong workforce, we kept a strong focus on serving our customers, members, providers, and patients. And continued to serve our society, but at an unprecedented level. You supported the people we serve with compassion, one person at a time. There is more work to do, and we are always ready. We were made for this moment. Steady, strong, united.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We're doing some COVID vaccinations. We started this last week on Thursday. The patients are super excited.
It's much easier to come here than it is to one of the mass vaccination sites. It's convenient, it's in my community. Really made it a simple, easy process.
It's a relief because it's been very stressful living this way, and I'm thrilled to be taking the vaccine.
I am a special education teacher, and I felt like it was really important for me to be as safe as possible so that I could keep my students safe and myself. I actually have an autoimmune disease. I have lupus, so it was extra important for me to be quarantining and staying safe.
This is right around the corner from where I live, and I think it's important to people to see Walgreens being part of their community and doing all they can to help us get back to being whatever the new normal is going to be. Thank you.
Everyone's excited to do this because being a pandemic, we can look back telling our kids and grandkids we did help our patients and community out the best we can.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Connie Lindsay, and I'm Executive Vice President at Northern Trust. And I'm also a proud member of the board of the Executives Club of Chicago. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. Before we get started, I'd also like to thank our presenting sponsors, OptumRx and Walgreens, as well as our silver sponsors, Kearney, United Healthcare, and ZS. For those of you who've not joined us before, we're going to be using GoToWebinar for today's program. If you hover your mouse on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a quotation bubble icon, where you'll be able to ask our panel questions. You should also find a small paper icon, which will open up today's agenda. If you have any technical issues, please email programs@executivesclub.org, and a member of our team will be in touch. As we approach the one-year mark since the start of the pandemic, I know we're all anxious to hear what progress has been made toward a widespread vaccine distribution. In just a few moments, we will hear from key players moving the COVID-19 vaccination forward in Chicago and beyond to share insight on the vaccination process, as well as the progress we've been made and we're all watching so closely. With many questions left to be answered, and the fast move towards progress, I know that the collective insights of our panel today will bring forth both awareness and guidance as we navigate through the next stages of this virus. I know we're all anxious to get this conversation started. So thank you to our speakers and to everyone joining us from home or wherever you may be today. It is indeed my pleasure to turn our program over to Dr. Sumit Dutta, Chief Medical Officer of OptumRx, United Health Group's freestanding pharmacy care services business, who will introduce our panel and moderate the conversation today. Dr. Dutta.
Thank you for the introduction, Connie, to this important topic. As Chief Medical Officer of OptumRx, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to facilitate this important conversation about COVID-19 and the importance of vaccination. Today, we will discuss efforts to ensure more Americans can get vaccinated for COVID-19, some of the challenges we've seen with the vaccination process so far, and opportunities for the business community to contribute to the vaccination effort. We are fortunate to be joined by a distinguished panel that are each driving aspects of our country's COVID-19 vaccination response. Our panel today includes Dr. Matt Hepburn, who heads vaccine development for the federal COVID-19 response, which was formerly known as Operation Warp Speed. Dr. Hepburn brings a wealth of experience in vaccine development, serving in the United States Army for 23 years, specializing in infectious diseases. Operation Warp Speed's efforts have been central to the rapid approval of effective vaccinations in the United States. We also have John Standley, who serves as Executive Vice President, Walgreens Boots Alliance, and the President of Walgreens. John brings extensive experience in the pharmaceutical supply chain, having previously served as Chief Executive Officer of Rite Aid. John will discuss the supply chain, the role of retail pharmacies, and moving the COVID-19 vaccine from manufacturers to patients, both at long-term care facilities and through retail pharmacies across the United States. And finally, from the city of Chicago, we are joined by Dr. Allison Arwady, who serves as the city's public health commissioner. Dr. Arwady has vast experience in pandemic response, including time spent in Africa working on the Ebola outbreak. Dr. Arwady brings all that experience to us right here in Chicago, and we'll talk about local regulation and the city's efforts on vaccine distribution. I'm also honored to be with this group today. On behalf of United Health Group, we too are an important partner in combating this pandemic. United Health Group is deeply committed to serving the community and accelerating vaccination for Americans. Our efforts, including advancing research on COVID-19 vaccine and treatment, vaccinating Americans, and providing reimbursement for testing, treatment, and vaccine administration, are a small part of what we do. Reflecting on this past year, it's amazing to see the tremendous collaboration between public and private entities. This illustrates that we can accomplish much when we work together. We were able to develop and approve a vaccine in record time. In little over a year from initial identification of the virus, we saw regulatory bodies come together with pharmaceutical manufacturers to develop life-saving treatments for patients, while running approval processes in parallel to obtain faster drugs to market. Today, we have 2 vaccines approved in the United States. Both of them are mRNA vaccines, one from Pfizer and another from Moderna. Treatments are emerging that reduce the severity of disease for those that contract COVID-19, such as monoclonal antibody therapy. Multiple other vaccines are in development, and we will likely have other options soon. Despite this progress, COVID-19 has had a profound and devastating impact around the world, both in terms of mortality and the economic impact. In the United States alone, there have been more than 450,000 COVID-19 deaths. The pandemic has brought to light inequities in healthcare. Not all people have experienced this equally. As we move forward, we know the pandemic continues to evolve and new COVID-19 variants lead to questions on whether currently authorized vaccines will protect people against these new variants. That is why conversations like these are so important. I am pleased to be with a group that reflects top public and private participation to combat a pandemic that is so pervasive. So let's start the questions. Dr. Hepburn, glad to have you here with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Hepburn, you bring obviously a wealth of experience, and you've been in the front lines on vaccine development. Can you tell us a little bit about why Americans should feel comfortable around the safety of these vaccines, given how rapidly they were developed?
Yeah, happy to do so. So first of all, thank you very sincerely for having me today. What an amazing group and a remarkable opportunity for me to talk a little bit about what I think, and happy to answer questions and keep the dialogue going. And even afterwards, if you hear something I said and you want to reach out, we'll give you my email address, and happy to keep talking. I think what we get asked a lot, sort of, what was the magic of Operation Warp Speed, or how did we accomplish what we did? There's a lot to it. But I do like that we fundamentally challenge the notion of the trade-off between that you can either be fast, or you can have a high quality product. And we said, absolutely not, we're going to do both. And so throughout the entire process, we said that we need to move quickly. We need to move at the pace to stop this pandemic, but we will not cut corners. We won't compromise quality. The way that we accomplished that, a lot was, as you alluded to, doing things in parallel, making decisions early to go to large scale manufacturing. But we also had the benefit of really decades of cutting edge research in vaccines and in technology like mRNA technology, that we knew you could make a vaccine quickly and you could scale it quickly, but you could also make a vaccine that met all of the regulatory standards that any other vaccine would do. That was when we first started. I remember my first day on the job, we said, we will meet all of the regulatory standards in the United States that any other vaccine would meet. And furthermore, we said we will be transparent throughout the process. When people ask, well, how do we know these vaccines are safe? I say, well, I think that these are safe and effective vaccines. That's my professional opinion, but just look at the data. Throughout the process, the data on the animal research or the preclinical space, the clinical trials, those results were published in peer-reviewed journals. They were put out there for the public to see. One of the other great things too is that as part of our FDA review process, they have a public advisory committee. And that essentially where they review, the company reviews all of their data that they're submitting to the FDA, and then has a panel of world-class vaccine experts ask them questions throughout the day. So it's an extraordinarily transparent process. I think in that transparency, not only do I think people can be confident that these are safe vaccines, but not just in the United States. I think, frankly, that our regulatory process, really led by the FDA, our transparency in everything we do in vaccine development, it sets a world standard. And so when people say, well, what are the best vaccines to address a global pandemic? We would say the vaccines that we invested in, you can take a look. You can understand how well they perform, and you can see their safety track record.
Thank you, Dr. Hepburn. We actually take advantage of the public sessions that you refer to in developing our point of view on the vaccines. Maybe you could actually comment on, I'm sure many have heard that this mRNA technology that you're talking about, some of the vaccines have to be kept in very cold conditions. Any comments on that for our listeners?
Sure. I think a couple, maybe a couple points on RNA. I think the first is that we highlight it as really a triumph of, if you will, scientific research and innovation. That the concept of RNA, I always describe it as the blueprint, right? So it's a blueprint that can tell a cell to do something. In this case, it tells a cell to express an antigen so that you can get a good, robust immune response that protects you. That concept is not new. That's been around for a while, but it really took scientific investigation. It took a lot of government investment by the National Institute of Health. I was a program manager at DARPA, and we were investing in these technologies. So those investments to prepare for the pandemic have now paid off for us. So it's a great example of why we do scientific research, why we invest in these types of technologies. And one of the other points I really like to make is that for the next generation of scientists, this is why they go in. This is why you go into science in the first place. That something that those scientists did could potentially now save millions of lives. So it kind of validates that whole choice of careers and professional development, and why we do STEM and why we nurture this as a nation. Specifically with the cold storage requirements, this is something we knew as an issue with the RNA vaccines. One of the things, but I'll highlight 2 quick points on it. The first is that the beauty of what we did with Operation Warp Speed is we brought together what I describe a lot as the best of both worlds. We had scientific expertise from the NIH, from other aspects of the Department of Health and Human Services, public health expertise from the CDC, and we brought them together with expertise from the Department of Defense. Now, I'm a medical person from the Department of Defense, but most of my colleagues are experts at logistics and operational planning. And one of the things I remember very early in this process from General Perna and that really strong Department of Defense team is they said, look, if you got a safe and effective vaccine, we will figure out how to get it there. Do not let that, if you've got a life-saving product, we will do everything we can to make sure that those logistics are in place so that you can get to shot in arms. And I think that that's really played out in terms of what we've seen in terms of vaccine distribution. The final point is, and I know we're highlighting, we need to highlight a lot of the contributions of the public health departments and the private sector, is that, again, 2-dose vaccine, a lot more complex. The cold storage, and the phrase we use for Pfizer is the ultra cold storage. I mean, it's really complex compared to most typical vaccines. But the beauty of what we've done in the government, partnered with state and local public health, partnered with the private sector, with the pharmacies and such, we've done that. We've been able to get the vaccines where they need to go. I know there's been and I'm sure we're going to get into it a lot more, the complexity of distributing vaccines to the American population. I do think we should marvel at how difficult that task is to do in the setting of a pandemic, in the setting of an emergency, and to really try to do our best to cover the American population in record time. I think there's much, and to also do, I think a key point is to make sure that the populations that are likely to be most affected by the disease are vaccinated, but to also maintain equity in distribution throughout the process. The expectation by the American people is high. It should be, that all of those factors will be achieved, and all of those factors will be achieved in record time without blinking an eye. I marvel at the task and how hard that is. I respect a lot of the amazing work that's been done now, so that we have over 40 million doses administered to Americans.
I think that's a great segue, John, to you, that complexity of getting a vaccine from a manufacturer or a wholesaler into patients' arms. I know Walgreens is central to that. Maybe you could talk about some of the complexities, some of the work that you're doing in long-term care facilities, and then potentially how the retail store, in the local Walgreens where I got my influenza vaccine, how that plays into the picture.
Well, first of all, thanks for getting your vaccine your flu shot at Walgreens. Appreciate that very much. And also just want to say thank you to the Executives Club of Chicago for sponsoring this panel. This is an important time in our country and a great way to share some information. So, and I think just starting with the long-term care facilities, we were contacted by the CDC a few months ago to participate with Operation Warp Speed to get vaccines into these long-term care facilities. And Sumit, as you said, and as Dr. Hepburn said, this was an extremely complex project. It involved building a supply chain that could handle the ultra cold storage of the Pfizer vaccine, which was the vast majority of the vaccine we initially received was Pfizer. Across our store network, we put up 1,000 hub stores where we took the inventory we originally received and moved it to these hub stores built across our store network, and then worked the inventory from the hub stores out to outer stores in the ring, if you will, to get as close as we could to where we were going to perform the offsite clinics at the long-term care facilities. So as we kind of look at the program, we were assigned about 30,000 long-term care facilities, both skilled nursing facilities and assisted living facilities, all across the country, spread out across our entire store network. And then what we had to do was train our 27,000 pharmacists how to handle this ultra cold vaccine, which takes special gloves and handling procedures, monitoring the storage very carefully to make sure it stays at temperature, and then go through a very careful defrosting and mixing procedure prior to vaccinating patients. We had to build all those processes out across the entire chain, across the entire country. The other complexity in this, in terms of long-term care facilities, just besides this, logistics and supply, the training and the staffing required to do it, was the coordination with the long-term care facilities themselves. This program, we finally got the green light to go on this program after a month or so of planning, right during the holidays. So the first challenge right out of the gate was contacting and working with the long-term care facilities during the holiday period, just to begin to schedule all of these clinics, and then to coordinate, everything related to the clinic, to get the inventory there, the pharmacists and technicians there to administer the vaccines, and then to monitor after the vaccines was given was quite a complex exercise. Having said that, we've made tremendous progress in this program over the last 6-7 weeks. Again, just coming right out of the holidays here, we have now completed the first dose at all of the skilled nursing facilities, almost 6,000 of them that we were assigned. We will complete all of the first doses at the assisted living facilities we were assigned next week. We've administered so far about 2.4 million, I think, vaccines as of today, almost all of which, majority of which have been in these facilities. And we expect that we'll actually complete the whole program by the first week in April. And I think what really allowed us to excel here was obviously our very talented and trusted pharmacists. Pharmacists are the most accessible, care provider we have in this country. And they're one of the most trusted healthcare providers as well. I can't tell you how many calls we're getting into our stores with people asking about the vaccine, trying to find out if it's safe, and they want to hear what their pharmacist has to say. about how safe the vaccine is. So we're, I think, playing a critical role, not just in terms of vaccinating in the long-term care facilities right now, but also in providing critical information to our patients, customers, and the entire country about that the vaccine is safe and that it's appropriate to get it. So I think we're making great progress here, and again, we'll wrap this program up, we hope, by early to mid-April.
If I could just add, I'm sorry to interrupt briefly, but just a thank you to John, like a personal thank you to John and to Walgreens. I mean, the point, probably the most important point I wanted to make is that the Walgreens CVS effort was a great example of corporate responsibility. This was not driven exclusively by profit and shareholders. And I mean, this was extraordinarily difficult for those groups to do. They did this in a remarkably short period of time, and I'm glad you highlighted it over the holidays, the worst time of year to try to implement this. And truly, the long-term care facilities are our most vulnerable population in the United States. We took, we as Americans, we take care of our own. And I'm really proud that we made such an effort to take care of our most vulnerable people so quickly, and because of, again, corporate responsibility so effectively.
Yeah, Dr. Hepburn, I have to tell you, Operation Warp Speed and the CDC have been tremendous partners to help us execute this program, between all the information that's been provided, obviously getting access to the inventory to deliver this program, working with us to build out the plan to do it. The support's just been absolutely tremendous, and I just want to say thank you to General Perna and to you and to the entire team for everything you've done to make this happen. Yeah.
John, I think you made a lot of great points. One in particular was about how, both you and Matt, about how patients at most need really were the ones that were focused on in order to get that initial vaccine. And I think this is a great segue to Dr. Arwady. State and local officials, such as yourself, play an essential role in determining who gets vaccine. And I think our group would very much appreciate understanding how you're thinking about policy, where we are in the city of Chicago, and where do you think it's going from here?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, thank you for having me. Thank you to the Executives Club. We so depend on our major employers here in Chicago, all of the partnership and work that many of you have already done with us and that you will be doing with us as we continue really to roll out this vaccine. So our job at the local level is to turn this vaccine into vaccinations, get it into arms. And that is a big job. Luckily, it's a job that, Chicago Department of Public Health does year-round all the time. We have a very strong immunization program here. Most of it's focused on children typically, but we have hundreds of providers. We're very used to handling the cold chain. The ultra cold was new for us, but we know how to do that. We built up a lot of capacity. We have good inventory management. We know how to set goals. We know how to really handle the supply. What's been different about this is we've never had the demand outstrip the supply so much. Typically, when we're trying to do flu vaccine, we've got all the flu vaccine and we're working on trying to get people, to be motivated to take it. What's been different here, besides that second dose need, has been that, we're getting vaccine allocated based on population as everywhere is in the country. But right now in Chicago, we are getting 6,000 first doses of vaccine every day to stretch across the city of Chicago. And we have more than 750,000 people who live in the city of Chicago who are eligible for that vaccine. And right now, we have broadly followed, the ACIP, the CDC's recommendations, and the state of Illinois. We've really tried to be aligned so there's as little confusion as possible. We started with 1A, which was our healthcare workers and our people who lived in the long-term care facilities, like you heard from John, partnering with Walgreens and others to get in there. But then now we're in 1B, which includes all Chicagoans over the age of 65, more than 360,000 of them, and the frontline essential workers that have been defined explicitly, more than 350,000 of them. Not to mention all of the people, the healthcare workers in 1A, who are now feeling more confident and raising their hand. So our biggest challenge, honestly, is not having the plans. It's not having, not knowing what to do. It's literally just as the vaccine supply ramps up. So we set some metrics right from the beginning. We said, number one, we're not wasting vaccine ever in the city of Chicago. And that has been a mantra we have driven all over the city as necessary to make sure that that doesn't happen, had plans to move vaccine at the end of the day. We've had excellent outcomes on that. Number two, we said we are not leaving vaccine sitting on the shelf. We set a goal of 95% of our vaccine out the door every single week. We get allocated weekly. We've hit that. We're now over 99% of our vaccine out every single week. And then number three, we said we want to make sure this vaccine is being administered efficiently. The two main things that we look at are efficiency and equity. And we're going to talk a little bit more about equity. But on the efficiency side, we want 85% or more of that vaccine in arms 7 days after it's delivered. And that's the standard that we hold our providers to. They all have to report into a couple of systems about how much vaccine they have on the shelf. We get individual level data that's protected, of course, so that we know where people live. We make sure they get that right second dose. And right now, 88% of that vaccine, setting aside the part that's for the long-term care facility program, 88% of it is getting into arms within a week, and that's going up every week. So we're doing well on the efficiency standpoint. And I think as we sort of look ahead here, people in Chicago hopefully know, I think tech has been a real challenge across the whole rollout, not just here in Chicago. Our systems are not really, our healthcare systems are not designed to talk to each other. And we've been needing to sort of overlay the need to have better integration around things like vaccine reporting across electronic health records and others. And so my team has been having to do a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that when clinics and hospitals are vaccinating, that data is appropriately sort of, the computers are talking to each other and it's getting into the state registry and then coming back around, so we're keeping track of it. So that's been getting better each week. But we partner with ZocDoc, which is the largest, it's a company, it's the largest online scheduler. This is what they do for 15 years, free to the city, free to patients, free to providers, no sale of data. And we're able, where all of our providers start to have vaccine that's available to the public, as opposed to right now, most of them are vaccinating their existing patients. They're all in this one network and people are able to see when appointments become available near them. So as we scale up here and look ahead into 1C, which is not going to be for a little while yet, we will have much more capacity to do more of the larger mass vaccination sites. We've got more than 500 providers already enrolled, ready to get vaccine, and we are good to go. We've got all the channels, and as vaccine gets here, we're pushing it out just as quickly as we can. I know we'll talk about equity a little more probably in a minute, but really thank you. It's wonderful to have a vaccine to, Dr. Hepburn and the team. We weren't planning really for vaccine until January at the earliest, so you caught us a little by surprise, and I had to cancel my holiday and everybody's like holiday that was sort of planned near the end of the year, but we were very happy to get going in the middle of December. And to have two vaccines that have this safety profile and this effectiveness profile, and really be able to build that public confidence, and then make sure we can execute on the strategy here is really a gift. And it's our job to make sure that vaccine is getting to the places where it is most needed. That's what gets Chicago past COVID.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Arwady. I think, two things come to mind as I listen to you talk about the great preparation in Chicago. It's this point on data, and it comes through in John's comments about the supply chain, and Matt, in your comments about the data and the transparency of it and getting it approved. I think, as I think about the questions that I'm getting now, and where the data really needs to provide more answers, it's around the new variants. And so, Matt, maybe I could turn to you and ask you a bit about the UK variant that people are talking about, South Africa,
Sure.
And whether the vaccines are effective. How should we think about that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So let me start by saying thank you, Allison. That's a great presentation. And I think, again, the state and local public health have been, again, heroes throughout this pandemic. I think what they never remind people of is that our health department is the cornerstone of the pandemic response. testing, contact tracing, public education, and all their day jobs. And then they have to distribute vaccine under ultra cold storage, under record time and incredible metrics, as you've said. So it's again, there. I think publicly we're not messaging enough kind of the accomplishments that we're seeing in these health departments and what they've done so far, and also sort of the idea of the reason vaccines were distributed to Allison in Chicago is because Allison knows her community better than anybody else. And so that, I think there was a lot of virtue in that process. And I think that pays off. And where it pays off is that, again, they're getting vaccine, they know their community, so they know how to get things done. But I know we'll get to it again, that they also know how we can solve these problems of equity, and that we can solve these problems of protecting the most vulnerable. I mean, if you just wanted to vaccinate people, you could go to a big stadium and just vaccinate everybody in the stadium. But that's not going to protect the most vulnerable because they're in the long-term care facilities. It's not going to reach out to communities that have been traditionally disenfranchised and that we want to bring in, it's the health of all Americans. And so, again, I think we'll hear more from her, but she's doing great work. I think before we get to the question of the variants, is that the other bit of good news, and we got work to do, but the other bit of good news is that with what we've seen recently from Johnson & Johnson, is that a single dose vaccine is safe and effective. And so the other thing that I think most people are aware of with that, Janssen is a European company that's part of Johnson & Johnson, but we'll call it the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, is that it also it's more stable, like if you keep it in a refrigerator. And so not only from a single dose standpoint, but also just from a logistics of distribution, we think this vaccine is going to have a lot to offer. And it's going to be another really nice tool in the toolbox. The other bit of good news we got last week was that another one of our vaccines, which is a company called Novavax, a trial that was done in the United Kingdom with 15,000 volunteers, showed that vaccine is also safe and highly effective. And to answer your question, it was conducted in the United Kingdom, and so there were patients or volunteers was part of that trial that had the UK, the so-called sort of UK variant. So we have some information that at least that vaccine is protective against the UK variant, and an accumulation of data accordingly. So two more, and again, Allison's doing a great job administering the vaccine. My job is to get you more vaccine. And so and that's manufacturing and FDA approvals and all that other stuff. Like we didn't stop at 2. Ideally, we're going to have multiple vaccines to cover down on the American population. Ideally, we're working very hard right now to say, are these vaccines safe in adolescents? Are these vaccines safe in pediatric populations? All of these are additional big lifts that we're still trying to set world records in terms of getting all that information going. But so hope is on the way. The comment on the variants, the one, I think everybody's sort of seen the news in terms of the UK variant being very concerning from being very transmissible. And transmissible in our world means bad. The more transmissible, the worse it is. So we are very concerned that could have an impact on sort of the current pandemic. We're very pleased if you look at the numbers in the United States, the numbers are going down in terms of new cases. But so we're concerned about the UK variant. The UK variant, based on a lot of work that we've done in the labs and in the test tubes, but also with the Novavax clinical trial is one example, and with another one of our vaccines with AstraZeneca vaccine, it looks like vaccines work about as well against the UK variant as they do against, if you will, version 1 of coronavirus. So you've heard the public health and Dr. Fauci messaging being vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. Get these vaccines that we do have out there. The 2 doses, for the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, the 1 dose for Janssen, and vaccinate as many people as possible. And I think that's the strategy we're pursuing. The variant out of South Africa, both in the test tube and both in results in clinical trials that have been done in South Africa, we are concerned about vaccine effectiveness. It doesn't mean the vaccines likely will be incompletely effective or do no good, but they may not be as protective as they were against, if you will, version 1 of the coronavirus. So that's the bad news. And there's a little bit of data on our AstraZeneca vaccine from trials in South Africa. There's a little bit of data from Novavax in South Africa. And the most amount of data is from the Janssen vaccine, again, showing what's partial protection. So it's not 95%, which is great, but it is, partial protection, which is helpful. But I think the important part was a subtle component of what Janssen shared publicly last Friday. And what they said was, even though it only had partial protection against getting symptoms, it was 88% protective against getting severe disease. And I think that's a critical message. It seems like all of our vaccines so far are doing really, really well, variant or not, at protecting against severe disease. And the idea of you may be exposed to coronavirus, you may have some symptoms, fever, chills, but if we can keep you out of the hospital, you're going to do well. But it's also going to allow our healthcare system to not get overwhelmed and to function as a really good healthcare system. The final point I would and in terms of these variants, we're tracking these very closely. We're getting up-to-date information both in the United States and looking worldwide. But we're also preparing that if you do need a booster shot against the variant, that we can give you a booster shot. And frankly, it's like the sequel in the movie. I don't know what your favorite sequels are. A lot of times the sequel's not as good as the original, so I get that. But did you like Empire Strikes Back better? Or did you like Godfather 2 better than Godfather 1? The sequel, I think, is going to be better this time because we've actually learned the lessons for RNA as example, to say, look how fast we could go. But as fast as we went, we can go faster. And so what we're saying is we're starting that process again, not only to say, if you need a booster shot against the South Africa variant, we're going to have it, and we're going to have it at scale. But also we see this as, if it's not the South Africa variant, if it's something else, we need to have essentially our mechanisms in place where we can go that fast for whatever the future threat entails.
That's encouraging. The idea that all these learnings in development become incorporated into how we move forward so that things like these variants can be handled. I think also the J&J vaccine that you referenced, I think the FDA meetings, the public meetings that you referenced, should be coming close to the end of this month. So this is something that's sooner for our audience than later. Maybe at this point, John, we pivot. I know that our company, OptumRx, has been receiving questions from businesses about how they can vaccinate their employees. I know you and I have discussed that Walgreens receive similar types of queries. How are you thinking about business-to-business solutions for Chicago area companies that want to vaccinate their employees?
Love to help. First thing we got to do is get some inventory. That's the key. So we have, as you mentioned, have had a tremendous number of inquiries from businesses, all across the country about how to vaccinate employees. And a couple of thoughts about that. I think first, if they're essential workers, part of 1B or 1C, then we're likely to be able to do something about that a lot sooner in terms of helping vaccinate those employees. In particular, I think types of businesses that are still operating, whether it's distribution businesses or manufacturing businesses that still have concentration of employees, like we do in our stores and our warehouses. We're interested to see what we can do to really help those businesses protect their employees as quickly as we can get access to inventory and those employees would be eligible. Then as we kind of move into the broader immunization phase here and have broader access, again, we'd be working to help employers get employees vaccinated so they can get back to work, providing information, about vaccination where we can legally, and coordinating testing, flu shots, as well as COVID vaccines for employers, just to try and make sure they can maintain a healthy workforce as we move forward. So we've got a number of different ways that we can put programs together to really help employers get employees back to work and get our country back on its feet.
Thank you, John. I know this has come up in our conversation a couple of times, so I think, Allison, this is a great time to address it. One thing that many of us have seen has been how unevenly this pandemic has affected people. Certainly, different groups of people suffer from this illness in different ways, as we talked about the elderly being one example. Other communities have different access to healthcare that impacts this. And then even the jobs that people have, certain people are working in jobs where there's greater exposure, or they're in work where unfortunately they aren't unable to work. So the health inequity issues really have been brought to light in a dramatic way. How is the city of Chicago thinking about equity for this vaccination for citizens?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks. So, Mayor Lightfoot has said multiple times, equity is not part of our strategy. It is our strategy. And, from the very beginning of the COVID outbreak, we saw this hit Black Chicago neighborhoods first, very, very hard. Later, we saw it hit heavily Latinx neighborhoods, very, very hard. And we've really seen these patterns move across the city. We've learned a lot about what puts people at high risk for COVID. And often it is things like having essential work that you can't do from home, living in more crowded housing circumstances, having higher levels of underlying conditions, et cetera. And so what we did, we've been doing this for a year at this point. So it's not like we don't have a good sense of, where are high risk settings in Chicago, meaning individual places like long-term cares or homeless shelters, but also the community areas that have really driven the outbreak. And speaking of variants, equity is the right thing to do, but also in terms of limiting our, the risk for variants and the risk for spread, getting vaccine into those communities has to be central to our strategy. And so we have a strategy here called Protect Chicago. The vaccine is at the heart of Protect Chicago. It existed prior to the vaccine. It's built on effective get out the vote and census efforts, which include a lot of door-to-door work. So before the vaccine, we knocked on 400,000 doors here in a lot of our hardest hit parts of Chicago, making sure people had access to testing, stuff about quarantine and isolation, supports, all the things that you need when you're in a high-risk community area. And now that the vaccine is here, we thinking about data, we looked at where in the city do we have high rates of not just low income and unemployment, but we looked at where do we have crowded housing? Where do we have a lot of people who are not connected to primary care providers? Where do we have a lot of people who are uninsured? We mapped out all of the 1B and 1C essential workers and said, where in the city are these workers congregated? We looked to see where do we have a lot of people with the underlying conditions that put people at high risk. And then we looked where in Chicago have we seen high COVID cases, high COVID deaths, high COVID hospitalizations. Put all that together, literally did a ranking of our 77 community areas, and we use that framework, our Chicago Community Vulnerability Index, in every single decision about allocating vaccine. We start with providing vaccine to small providers who are in some of these under-resourced areas. As long as they can use 85% of it a week and they're doing the appropriate reporting, they get their requests filled first every week. We're starting where we're bringing, out and doing homeless shelters and senior living, et cetera. We we start in those higher risk communities, and those are where we're seeing the lower vaccine uptake. And then we've got 15 communities, which we call Protect Chicago Plus, which are literally right now the door-to-door. Pull in all the community-based organizations. Let's get you signed up for a vaccine. We do not think, there are some people who will sign up through ZocDoc and sign up through other things and come through the mass vax, but a lot of people, we need to actually call them, whether it's their healthcare provider, their pharmacy, the health department, really saying, let me get you an appointment and let me get you into a clinic that's in the church down the street, the clinic that you know, the providers that you have. So in addition to the efficiency metrics, we're following these equity metrics, and it doesn't do Chicago any good to have the north half of the city highly vaccinated and other parts of the city very under-vaccinated. It doesn't get us past COVID. So we're working against a lot of forces here, but we think it's absolutely the right thing to do. And just the last thing quickly, if you don't mind, on employers, in addition to a lot of the strategies that we have directing, to healthcare providers, a lot of work we're doing already through employers and much more to come as we get more vaccines. So in 1B, we've got industry-specific groups. We've been sort of rolling them in. We started with the highest risk. Transit's coming later this month. Manufacturing's kicking off in March. And if you go to chai.gov/COVIDvax, there's a whole web page for employers. You can sign up there. It's got information about how to be a vaccine provider if you're used to doing that through your employee health. If you're a small business, fewer than 250 employees, you can put in the survey, and when it's your turn, we'll think about getting your employees into our mass vax sites. There's information on there about how to test your employees' sort of vaccine readiness, which we would love people to do. There's a vaccine employer toolkit meant for employers in Chicago, video, PSAs, things for your newsletters, there's scripts. We would love to be preparing with you now, because we know that often people who may be less likely to go to the doctor do still go to work, and really making that be a way that we vaccinate a little further down the line, important for efficiency and important for equity.
Thank you,
Dr.
Alice. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Dr. White, that's you're doing a tremendous job, and I really do appreciate everything, and I know all of us at Walgreens appreciate everything that you and your department are doing for the city of Chicago. And I just want to tell you, we are here to help, to do everything we can to assist you. So just please let us know. I know we're getting some federal inventory, on the 12th allocated to us across 15 different jurisdictions, but one of which is the city of Chicago. So I know we'll be working closely with you to figure out where that inventory can go and where we can most effectively use it. We just announced this morning a strategic partnership with Uber to break down the barrier of transportation to vaccines. And so they'll be coordinating with us to provide transportation to Walgreens or to offsite Walgreens clinics to help get people to vaccinations. And one of the first markets we're going to focus on is Chicago as well. So, we're here to help, and please let us know what else we can do.
And it's really great to hear in really all of the panelists' comments how, Matt, to pick up on your opening comments, how public and private entities are coming together in order to address the needs of our fellow citizens, thinking about their needs first, and really secondarily how some of the other aspects of it work. So it's unbelievable how quickly this time has gone by. So I want to kind of end with one question that I'm going to ask all of you, and I might go in reverse order this way so that Allison gets the first chance at it. This has been a year, really, I mean, for all of us, there's no parallel to it. And mostly it's been hard. I think there are those still silver linings. I think the fact that all of us are traveling less and doing meetings like this via Zoom is a positive. But I think ending on a hopeful note is the best way to have a discussion like this. So Allison, let me start with you. What have you learned from this year, and what makes you most hopeful for the future?
Yeah, so I mean, boy, have we seen Chicago step up. Private, public, volunteers, you name it, we have seen over and over and over again when the health department has said, we need help with X, we need help reaching out to seniors, we need help with this food distribution, we need help with this messaging. We have just seen people willing to do the right thing. I think it's really highlighted how much people care about this city and getting us through COVID. And I'm really optimistic that the work that we are doing now, we are talking about equity. It's not like we weren't talking about it before, but now I think we're talking about it in ways that are very much that we're not going to forget, and that I certainly intend as the health department to continue to use the things that we are building for COVID to build a stronger Chicago. Like all of the tech pieces that we're doing now are things we want to bring forward. The community health workers that we're doing now that are doing vaccine knocking, we want them working on those chronic underlying diseases after the fact. And so I'm really confident, this has been such a difficult year for everybody, that we have built already a strong response, and we're trying to think not just about next month, but next year, 5 years, 10 years. And the partnerships that employers are such a huge part of that. We're really confident that Chicago is going to come through this as a stronger city at the end.
Thank you, Allison. John, what about you? What are you most hopeful for?
Yeah, just, getting our teams and our customers and our patients, safely through the pandemic, and really getting an opportunity to focus on the future, to learn from this experience and to take our business and our country forward in a better way as we come out the backside of the pandemic.
Thank you, John. And Matt?
A couple of things. The first is to build off what Allison's saying too. I think there is the thing that got me through it was a horrible year, but the thing that got me through last year was this idea that Americans take care of each other, and this idea that Americans really step up in a crisis. And I think, Allison's example in Chicago is a great case in point. I always made the point, we had over 100,000 volunteers who signed up for our vaccine clinical trials. Think about that. You don't know if you're getting the placebo or not, and you just, that's what I feel like people did during this pandemic, and that sort of spirit that I think is demonstrated in Chicago and demonstrated, I really hope that does carry through. And I think that carries through in transforming healthcare so that we actually do health, and I'm glad Allison made these points about, I think we can figure out, with pharmacies, with public health, I think we can do better as a health and a public health system to take better care of Americans with all that we've learned from this pandemic. The second thing that I really like, frankly, is that not only do I think we can have an impact and really stop this pandemic locally, but I think we can also have an impact globally. And I think the investments that we've made in these vaccines, and then being able to make a lot of these vaccines, allow us to vaccinate Americans, but with the intent, though, too, is that a global pandemic requires a global response. And frankly, I've always been kind of proud that, America has had a leadership role in global public health and in, being a good citizen of the world. And I see that that we are, I think, are also going to have an opportunity to collaborate internationally so that we can address this pandemic globally. And then finally, again, if we get really good at responding to this pandemic, then we can turn our attention, whether it's technology, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's public health distribution, to all those other things, that still plague us, whether it's tuberculosis or some of the other infectious diseases or other chronic health problems. There's no reason we can't take this playbook and tackle other health problems. And I think we're getting much better at it.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hepburn. There's a lot for us to be hopeful for. The fact that all of us are here together working on behalf of other Americans and our fellow Chicagoans, caring for them, is clearly something that's hopeful. To apply these things to the next healthcare situation that comes up and be able to respond faster and better is certainly something to be hopeful for. I'm thankful to the three of you for sharing your insights from the front line, and I'm looking forward to my fellow Chicagoans out there, working with you on vaccinations and moving forward into the future. So thank you, in partnership with the Executive Club of Chicago, for listening to this discussion. Thank you, panelists, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.